This series is, I think, a really good series because it's real. It's relevant. It's what we all go through. A lot of us are going through it right now. We go through things that we don't understand. Why in the heck am I going through this? If I am a believer of God, if I have submitted to Him, if I tithe, if I come to church, if I pray, if I read the Bible, I consider myself a good person, a good Christian. Why am I suffering this way? And a lot of times we want to ask God that question. We want to say, Lord, why is it that you are not doing anything about this? And so we have the tendency to think that maybe he's not real, right? And that tells us right there, that'll tell you right there where your faith is. Thank you, Josiah. Thank you so much, buddy. That maybe there's some work to be done there. If I'm already doubting because I'm going through this really hard thing, if I'm doubting if there's even a God, that's a sign that maybe I need to seek Him more or harder or something. I need to pray or talk to the pastor about it. Or you might think that He's just not interested in you because you're not as important as Pastor Keith, or you're not important as somebody else. Or you might think that He's upset at you, that He's angry, that's the reason why, oh yeah, I know I've lived a sinful life, or I've done this and done that, and maybe that's why He's just not interested in me, and so He's allowing me to this. He's teaching me a lesson, kind of deal. But I don't know if it's any of those things, and it might not be any of those things. It's obviously not the first one that God doesn't exist. A long time ago, when I was pastoring in Portland, Oregon, I had a friend that became a really good friend of mine, and I got a picture of him up there. That's the guy in the purple shirt there in the middle. I found out, and he's a pastor still, and I found out that he found out that he had cancer, and bright future. He's done so many things, a great prayer warrior and all sorts of good stuff, and somebody that I looked up to. I found that he had cancer. I didn't know how to take that news. I didn't know what to do about it. I felt awkward calling him up and saying, hey, I just found out. How are you doing? It should be really easy to do that, right? But this is a guy that would mentor me, and I just didn't feel like, what am I going to say to him? He's the one that's teaching me what to say in these situations, so what would I say to him? Well, I got the opportunity to, in one of our big meetings that he was there, and we prayed for him. And afterwards, we were walking. It was a chilly day, I remember. And in Portland, Oregon, there's these really tall evergreens, and we're walking on some grounds, and we're just making light conversation. And I just felt like, I just need to ask him. I can't pretend like I don't know. And I said, hey, how are you taking this? Is what I said. I didn't say how are you doing. I said, how are you taking this news? What are you going through? And I felt really dumb asking him that question because, I see him as this big giant. But he said something to me that I'll never forget, and I wrote it down and I want to read it because this is exactly what I remember him saying to me, and I want to get it right because it really changed my view of how to perceive anything that I go through, circumstances that I go through. I could never imagine having to find out that I have cancer, or somebody in my immediate family that they have something that's going to eventually, that is going to speed the process of death. And he said to me, Edgar, he said, this cancer that's inside of me isn't something that I hate or am mad at. That's a new thought for me. And then he said, instead of asking God, why me, I'm asking God how I can use this cancer for His glory. That's a new thought for me. And then he said, I feel God has entrusted me with this cancer. He actually said that, so that I can use it to better understand those who have it and are dealing with it. He said, this cancer is going to give me a new perspective in life and in how better to love God's people. I was just thrown back by that. I could not believe that he actually just said that this is a gift that God has given me. This is cancer. This is gonna cause you pain and suffering. It's gonna cause your family pain and suffering, and you're gonna die sooner than you expected to die. But he didn't see it like that at all. He was like, you know what, Edgar, I'm definitely gonna die someday, whether it's today or tomorrow. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna die. It's what I do with what I have today that's gonna matter. That's gonna count. the thing that we said last week was, that some of us might be going through some really difficult situation in our marriage or your finances or your job or, just in some relationship, and you feel, or you found out that, you've got some kind of illness that's not going to go away, that the doctor said, look, there is no cure for that, and we're going to give you some medication, and you're going to have your good days and your bad days, but this is just the way it's going to be. This is your new normal. How do you deal with that? And so that's where this series comes from, because I know that a lot of you, including myself, we're dealing with one of these topics or another topic that's bringing us grief or pain or suffering or not understanding why is it that we're going through this. And we spend countless hours praying and seeking God about it, wanting to hear anything from God, right? Wanting to hear just a little bit, and that God says, Edgar, I know what you're going through, and I'm with you. That would be sufficient enough for me to say, okay, then I'm going to go. I'm good to go, God. As long as you know, then I'm good. And sometimes we just don't hear anything. And last week we shared probably a reason that we don't hear anything is because we're so focused on our issue, on our circumstance, that we forget that there's a big world out there and that there's a big God out there with a bigger plan than just us. And we shared on how John the Baptist, he was in this prison, in this little cell. He couldn't see beyond that, and he's asking Christ, hey, are you really the Christ? Because I'm still here. If you were the really, why aren't you saving me? Why aren't you delivering me from this? And the reality was that he never delivered him from prison, because he'd done what God had asked him to do. I mean, really, I am God's worker, and you're not going to help me? What's the deal with that? He accomplished his mission. God was excited and happy for him. Jesus thought that he was the greatest man in the world. And later, if you don't know the rest of the story, John gets beheaded. He never sees freedom again. And that's how he dies. And that's how he honored God. And so today I want to continue that thought. Well, wait a second. And so you go to the Bible and you read some of this stuff, and I don't know about you, but as bad as that sounds, that encourages me. It encourages me that even though I'm going through something really difficult, it doesn't mean that God is uninterested or doesn't care or is mad at me. But it's the opposite, that he really knows what I'm going through, that he is with me as I'm going through this. And here's really important, here's what we're going to receive from today's message, is that it's with him, it's because of him that I'm able to go through this. He is who I get my strength from. He is who my faith comes from. He is who my, the ability to go through whatever situation, circumstance that I'm in comes from. And so there's a story, another story of another individual in the Bible that we see as a giant, that we see as a pillar of the Word of God, that we see as, if it wasn't for him, what would the Bible look like? And this guy is Paul. So Paul is someone who was sold out for Jesus Christ, right? But he didn't start that way. He was someone who hated anybody that was following Jesus Christ. He actually got permission from the government to go and persecute all of the quote-unquote Christians, people who considered themselves followers of this guy that said he was the Messiah, he was the Son of God, against the Pharisees and all that stuff, that if you follow him, then the government had given him permission to go, not just to arrest them, but to torture them and kill them. And he enjoyed doing that. He thought he was doing something good for God. He believed in God, he just didn't believe in Jesus Christ. There's no way that could have been the Messiah. Well, then later on, he has an encounter with Jesus, as some of you know the story, and he becomes the biggest, strongest advocate for Christ. There was no going back for him anymore. If anything, he felt crummy crummy is a silly word, but he felt bad that he had wasted all of his time, and not just wasted the time, but that he was against Jesus for so many years. And so he becomes the person who says, you know what, I was wrong, absolutely, but here's the truth. And coming from him, people were going to believe him, because didn't you just not like us yesterday and now you're all for us? Yes, and here's why. Something happened to Paul in his ministry that really allows me to, again, go into the Bible and pull it out and say, wait a second, Paul went through something that I am going through now. He also had his moments where he said, what's going on, God? Why are you doing? Aren't I your servant? Aren't I the guy that you've called to go and do this specifically? Didn't you set me apart from everybody? Didn't you meet with me? Didn't you appear to me? Didn't you show me that, hey, what you're doing is not right. I need you now to do something else for me. I need you to live for me now. Wasn't I that guy? And if I was that guy, if this wasn't just my dream, why are you allowing this to happen to me? And what was going on with him is that he had this illness, this ailment that he was not going to get rid of. And he's frustrated about it. And he's praying to God and he's asking him, what's the deal? Why me? And so if you have your Bibles with you, I want to start here in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7. And it's also going to be up on the screen, and I'm going to be using the NIV. I got a new Bible, and so far I really like it. I enjoy it. It's called the Voice Bible. I might have shared it with just a few of you, that this is just, if you don't know how to read the Bible, this is a good Bible because it reads like a play. So if John is saying something, it's got John's name on it, on the margin, and then it says what he says. If the Pharisees are talking, it says Pharisees, and then, and so forth and so forth. So if you're going through the Old Testament, there's like a gazillion people talking. It's got all the people that are talking and tells you who's saying what. Because if you read it without that, you're going to miss who's saying what, and it kind of becomes a little confusing. So that's why I like this Bible. And it's a little expanded as well. So it's not like the NIV is just, it cuts to the chase and it is what it is. But this explains a little bit. So I'm going to use this a little bit today as well. But it says, the Bible says that so Paul learned something that he wasn't expecting to learn through this illness, through this ailment that he's going through this suffering. He says, therefore, in verse 7, chapter 12, therefore, in order, and I highlight that in yellow because that's for a purpose. So in order depicts the purpose. In order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given. And I highlighted given because if you do just a little bit of study in the Greek, you're going to understand that this word given is a positive word. It's a word given like when in Christmas, when you're given something, you say, I was given a gift. That's a positive term. That's a positive action, right? And so Paul is excited here that in order for him to stay grounded, for him to stay level-headed, for him to stay focused on the prize, focus on the cause, focus on what's important in life, he was given something so that he doesn't get a big head and loses sight of what's important. What was he given? And the verse continues, and he was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. And it doesn't make sense, right, to have that positive word. I was given this awesome thing, and what it becomes, it's a thorn, something that's going to be painful, that's not going to be easy for him to have, that he's going to be reminded constantly that he's hurting. But he says, but it's for a purpose. He says, in order for me to be focused on what's important and not on just what's happening to me, or of how God is using me, or on what place I have in the church, or on how other people see me, and my fame might allow me to be focused more on my fame rather than I'm focusing on God. He's given me this thing. And then this Bible here, the Voice, it puts it this way. It says to keep me grounded and to stop me from becoming too high and mighty due to the extraordinary, I love that word, character of these revelations, I was given a thorn in the flesh, a nagging nuisance of Satan, a messenger to plague me. He was experiencing these moments with God. God was using him in such a way that people were getting saved, that the church was growing. He was making a lot of noise in a positive way. He was changing society. He was changing culture. He was changing thought. He was the leader of leaders. And Paul says, and then along the way, I found out that I've got this thing. And I don't know what that was. I don't know if it was a sight problem, if it was him, passing out every few minutes, I don't know what it was, but it was something that was going to bother him, something that bothered him. Hence, a thorn on my side. Something within him. I don't know about you, but I sometimes, I have to admit, will say that to God. Lord, you called me here, and I'm going through this, and I don't know if I should be going through this. It's something that I did. Did I not hear you correctly? And then I remember, oh, that's what John said to you. Are you the Jesus? And so, Lord, what's the deal here? And so I go to these places in the Bible, and I hear other pastors speak about these verses, and it reminds me that, wait a second, it is not all about me. It doesn't matter what I go through. I already know where my eternity lies. I already know who my Lord and my King is. I already know what it is that I'm supposed to be focused on and after. And along the way, it doesn't matter how I get there, as long as I'm still headed in that direction. So this wasn't, in verse 8 it says, that Paul said that 3 times, he says, I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. In 2 Corinthians 12:8. 3 times. And this wasn't just 3 separate times, like once in the morning and then in the supper time, and maybe once again in the next day or the next week. Lord, I'm praying again. Could you please just... No, this was like 3 seasons of his life where something, and I have to imagine just reading about Paul, all of these highs that he would go through. And he would probably say, Lord, you know what? I really need you to take this away from me, because look what's happening. And if you would just take this away from me, how much more could I do? Or man, I would not waste time having to deal with this if you would just take away this from me so that I can do more for you. 3 times, Paul says, I pleaded with God, take it away from me. I can do much more if you would just take this from me. Doesn't that sound like us? Lord, why? And if you could just, help me out through this. And it's always like we're always seeking to get away from whatever pain that we're in, seeking to make things better for us right in a hurry, because that's the American way, isn't it? It's just not right to know that somebody else is suffering. We've got to hurry up and fix it. We got to patch it up. We got to get them to say, I'm good now, I'm not hurting, so that we can walk away peacefully. It's uncomfortable to be there and they're still not fixed and something's still horribly wrong and you're like, I don't know what to do about it. It's almost like, okay, what kind of conversation do I say? What do I say now? What kind of small talk do I know? Knowing that here's this, huge problem in their lives and I can't do anything about it. And so you just rather not hang out with that person because you don't want to deal with it. Because it's just not the American way for something not to be fixed. And so when you're going through something wrong, financially, work, relational, whatever, physically, you gotta get it fixed right now. You gotta go to that doctor and you gotta say, fix it. Fix it. You go to your boss, look, I'm struggling financially, give me more money. I need more money. I've got a family to feed. Whatever it is, your relational, you're not cutting it for me. You're not doing it for me, so I need to move on. Or you need to do something different because you're just not doing it for me. And it's always something, and we got to fix it. We got to fix it in a hurry. And we won't stop until we finally can say, I don't have to deal with it anymore. And Paul's saying, this isn't going to happen for me. God says, no dice. I'm sorry, Paul, but you know what? You're going to have this, and I want people to know that you have this. I want people to know that when you're struggling, that you can tell them, man, if it wasn't for God, I would not be able to do this. Because you're still going to do great things. And it doesn't mean that I don't love you, Paul. As a matter of fact, I love you so much that I'm going to give you this so that you cannot lose focus inside of me, who's carrying you through this, who's giving you the call. It's kind of weird if you're not a Christian. That doesn't sound appealing, does it? That sounds like, well, I don't want any part of that. But for all of us that are believers and understand a life with God, this makes sense. This is, well, yeah, absolutely. It's not about me. It's about Him. It's always been about Him. And I get to be a part of His family. I get to be a part of this church. I get to be a part of this ministry. I get to say that He is my Lord and my Savior. And this is what Paul says that God said to him when he asked him, finally, probably the 3rd time, God, can you please, when are you going to let it go? When are you going to let me not suffer? When? And God says to Paul says that he said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. My grace is sufficient for you, Paul. Think about that just a little bit. My grace, Paul. You didn't deserve a second chance or anything. My grace, because I've said I forgive you, because I love you, because I've shown you how much, that should be good enough for you to carry you for the rest of your life. But he goes on and he says, and then for my power, go back, thank you so much. For my power is made perfect in weakness. So I want to be your number one in your life. I want to be known as the number one for you in your life. When people see you, they need to see me. And you need to tell them that it's me. And I love how Paul responds. He said, as soon as he heard from God, he said, Roger that. Roger that. Thank you so much. I needed to hear you. And verse 9 continues and it says, therefore, Paul said, I will boast. I mean, he says, I am gonna tell everyone. I'm not gonna hide this anymore. It is an ailment, and it is something that I'm struggling with. And I'm gonna tell you, yeah, absolutely, I'm struggling. When you ask me, hey, but aren't you like, well, yeah, I am. But you know what? The power of God is what's carrying me through this. It is through Him that I'm able to do any of this, anyhow. And he says, so therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. Is there anything more important for us as Christians than to know that the power of Christ rests on us? Than to know that we're here and we want Him to walk with us? We want to hear His voice constantly. We want to know that we matter to Him. And Paul's saying, absolutely, it's all about Him. It's all about Him. So I will gladly, God, if you're telling me that this is for a purpose, that this isn't just something that, oh no, God, He knows that God can handle it. He knows that God can deliver Him. But God is saying, no, this is for a purpose. And that's why we started at the beginning where He says, so that something can come out of this. Something good, something greater than me, something bigger than I could ever possibly do. So God, if you're going to use me and giving me this gift, this painful gift, I'm going to see it as such. Because you're going to do something great from it. And it's going to highlight you. And your kingdom's going to grow from this. Thank you for using me, for allowing me to be a part of your plan. More than I ever imagined it to be. I thought I was just going to work for you and do this and this, plant a couple of churches, and then I'm done and I'm good. But man, you want much more from me? You're going to use me that much more? So Paul says, so this is just a reminder, because if it wasn't for that, man, I might open my own shop and start charging for counseling sessions, or, I might just veer off. But no, it is not about me. It's not even about how I live, but it's about Him and what He can accomplish through me, and not the other way around. And I heard another pastor use this phrase. He says, embracing your inability is a prerequisite to experiencing Christ's ability. That's right. That's what Paul's talking about. Embracing your inability is a prerequisite to experiencing Christ's ability. Embracing your weakness. I can't do this. In our membership class, I was telling the people that I was talking to that, one of the things that I shared with our leaders very early on, and I said to my leaders, you know what? If we do everything that we know we can do, I don't want to do it. Because it's not about us. It's not about what we can accomplish. It's not about what we can build. But if we always do the things that we know we can't do and we're relying on God to accomplish them, now we've got something. Now we can say that we are relying completely on Him to do whatever it is that He's going to do through us. So we don't ever want to play maintenance in this church. We don't ever want to say, well, that just sounds too risky. You know what? But if it is to reach more people, if it is to continue the cause of Christ, then absolutely we want to do it. And if we know that we can't do it, it's even better, because we're going to be able to experience Him in our inability of doing something great for Him. And so Paul's like, yeah, so bring it on. He says in verse 10, chapter 12, that is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness and insults. You think you can insult me? Bring it on. He says in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. because he knows he is experiencing the power of God, that he's going to be able to go through all of those things, and he went through all of those things with the power of God. And so this morning you might be sitting there and you came in and there's a big thing that's happened in your life and in your household, and you don't know what to do about it anymore. As a matter of fact, you've given up and you're like, I don't want to deal with it anymore. And I hope you're not at the point where you think that life is not important anymore, that I don't care about my life anymore. But you might be thinking, but this relationship isn't good enough anymore. It's not fulfilling me, or they're not the right person, or my job is just not the right one because I'm not making enough and they're treating me like this, and I'm just going to run away from that. That's just not what I need right now. Or you know what? What is it? What is it? And you're looking for a fix, and you're looking for a resolution, and you're looking for it to be good again, for it not to hurt anymore, for it to be perfect again, like it was in your mind when you met each other and you thought, that's the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. That's the person that's going to make my dreams come true. That's the person that's going to love me no matter what I do, no matter what I say. That's the person that's going to pick me up when I fall. And then none of that's happening. You fall and he or she kicks you even more. It's not the picture that you had when you went into this. Paul had this picture that God would just clear paths and open seas for him as he's walking and doing his work. And now here he finds himself with this horrible illness that he's pleading God to take away. But he hasn't lost focus and sight of what the prize is. So do we have to just, could it be that we, in our prayers, and the beautiful thing is that God allows us to pray for this, you see. That God allows us to say, absolutely ask me to deliver you from this. That's okay. And a lot of us have experience where he has delivered us from it. And a lot of us have experience where it does get better, where that isn't an issue anymore. But a lot of us have experienced that 10 years ago, we're still with the same issue. And we're still unhappy because we're looking for a resolution. And at the moment that you focus on him and stop focusing on your ailment, then God will use you in the way that you were meant to be used. Man, Satan loves it. Loves it when we just focus on that thorn and not on God. See, Paul says, so that I can focus on him, so that he can have the glory, so that his power will rest on me. He gets it. And what if we have to be like Paul and say, Lord, I'm accepting this gift, this painful thing that I don't desire, and I'm going to go through, and I wouldn't want to do this again. I don't want to go back again and relive this, but if this is what I have, then I accept it. And if this is for your kingdom, if this is for you to be glorified, and when people ask me, I can't believe how happy you look and how excited you are about your church and how active you are in your with Christ, and man, it just seems like all this stuff is going on in your life, but you're pretending like nothing is going on, and you're going to say, no, see, that's the power of God right there. That's because of God that I'm able to be this way, that I'm still able to find joy in life. Because without him, and if all I had was that, I would live in a dark place, and I would probably want to take my life. But it is through his power that I'm able to keep going and serve him. Not keep going, not to keep going to look for more stuff for me, not to keep going to find another happiness, but to keep going to be his servant, to love him, to honor him, to worship him, to say, Lord, I'm already yours. I already have everything that I'll ever desire, and so this life is yours. I will worship you until I see you in glory. How many of us will have to do that? Christ, and the night that he was betrayed, was pleading with his Father. And Luke kind of brings us to that little window and shows us what that conversation looked like. And it's found in Luke chapter 22, verses 41 through 42. And it says that Jesus, it says he withdrew about a stone throw away beyond them. And that Jesus knelt down and prayed, Father, Dad, if you are willing, because I know you can, because you are my Father, you are my God, you are everything. If anybody can do anything, it's you. If you are willing, take this cup from me. If there's any way, I know that this next thing that's going to happen, it's going to be great for the kingdom, and it's going to showcase your power and who you are, and it's going to save the world, and it's going to be way better than it's ever been, and this is the climax of your story, and I totally get it. But if there's any way, any other way that you can possibly do this, would you do it that way? And then Jesus finishes his prayer and he says, yet not my will, but yours be done. Not my will, but yours be done. And sometimes we don't understand why God would do something until time has gone by. Enough time has gone by, and we can look back in the road that we traveled and see all of the beautiful things that happen after that. Whether we're still without ailment or not, but all of the lives that were touched, especially if you're focused, stayed on God, if you can proclaim a testimony and say, man, I remember, and if it wasn't for him, I would not be able to do whatever it is that you're doing, or gotten here, or done this or that, or blessed him or her, or my family, or whatever. But you're able to see that. It's amazing to me that when a forest burns, it looks like no way ever again could there ever be life. It is desolate. It is black. It is done. And then somehow you begin to see new life spring up, and it becomes beautiful again. Would you be willing to say, Lord, your grace is sufficient for me. Your power is made perfect in my weakness, and I'm okay with that.